For years, the house on Hollow Road stood silent, an oddity in the small town of Little Hollow. It wasn't just its derelict state that unsettled passers-by, but the way its features seemed to smile. The sagging roof curved into a grotesque grin, and the windows, cracked and covered in grime, gleamed like watchful eyes. Locals whispered that the house had a face of its own, and over time, it had earned a fitting name, the Grinning House. No one dared to enter, not after the stories began circulating. It was said that those who crossed the threshold were never the same, if they came back at all. It was a bitterly cold autumn evening when Jack received the dare. He had always been reckless, and his friends knew he wouldn't turn down a challenge no matter how foolish. They sat at the old diner near the outskirts of town, the windows fogged up from the heat inside. Olivia, with her mischievous grin, leaned over the table. "Go inside the Grinning House and stay the night," she said. Her voice was playful, but the gleam in her eyes was sharp. Jack laughed, but something about the dare tugged at his bravado. "That's it? Stay one night?" he asked, trying to sound casual, but he felt the weight of the challenge settle in his chest. "Yep, sunrise or nothing," Olivia said, leaning back and crossing her arms. The other three at the table watched with a mixture of excitement and unease. There was a reason no one had ever followed through with staying in the house. Most didn't even go beyond the gate. But Jack was different. At least, that's what he wanted everyone to believe. "I'll do it," he said, forcing a grin. The others cheered, though their laughter felt thin against the crackle of the diner's old radio. Jack stood before the Grinning House just after the sunset, the last traces of daylight bleeding away into the sky. His breath puffed in the cold air as he walked up the crooked path leading to the front door. The house loomed over him, its sloping roof twisted into that unsettling smile. From this close, he swore the windows, those hollow, black voids, were staring at him, waiting. He shook his head, dismissing the thought. "It's just an old house," he muttered to himself, gripping the flashlight in his hand. He pushed the creaking door open and stepped inside. The air inside was stale, thick with dust, as though it hadn't moved in decades. Jack clicked on his flashlight, sweeping it across the foyer. The walls were lined with faded, peeling wallpaper, and the wooden floor groaned beneath his feet. A narrow staircase twisted upward to the second floor, disappearing into shadows. Jack closed the door behind him, the sound echoing unnaturally through the house. The moment it clicked shut, an odd sensation washed over him. The air felt heavier, thicker, like the house had sealed itself, locking him inside. Shrugging off the sudden unease, he reminded himself of the dare. One night. Sunrise wasn't far off. He could handle it. The hours dragged on, and Jack wandered from room to room. Most were empty, just filled with dust and decay. A few still held old, rotting furniture, couches with torn upholstery, a rocking chair in the corner that seemed to sway ever so slightly when Jack wasn't looking directly at it. In one room, a cracked mirror hung upon the wall, its glass foggy and warped. As Jack passed, he caught a glimpse of his reflection, or at least he thought it was his. For a split second, his reflection wasn't smiling. His mouth was set in a grim line, but in the mirror it curved upwards into a wide grin. Jack stared for a moment, his heart thudding in his chest. When he blinked, the reflection had returned to normal. "Old house, old mirror," he muttered, shaking it off, though the hairs on the back of his neck prickled. He moved on to the next room. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the creak of floorboards beneath his feet and the occasional soft thump from somewhere upstairs. The house seemed to breathe, the walls sighing with each step he took. Then, just after midnight, the whispers began. At first, they were so faint that Jack thought he was imagining them. A soft, indistinct murmuring, like a distant conversation taking place just beyond his hearing. He paused in the hallway, straining to listen. The whispers faded, replaced by the sound of his own heartbeat thudding in his ears. But as he moved deeper into the house, they returned, louder this time. "You shouldn't be here." The voice was raspy, broken, as though it hadn't been used in years. Centuries, even. Jack's flashlight flickered, casting strange, shifting shadows on the walls. He froze, listening intently, but the whispers stopped once again. His pulse quickened. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice breaking the thick silence. No answer came, only the creaking of the house, settling around him. As the night wore on, the house seemed to change. The walls, once solid and decrepit, seemed to close in, warping ever so slightly. Rooms shifted, hallways that once led to the kitchen now circled back to the foyer. The staircase spiraled in unnatural ways, its steps leading into endless darkness. The whispers grew louder. Jack could no longer ignore them. They were no longer faint. They hissed in his ear, urgent and angry. "Get out. Leave before it's too late." The grin on the house's exterior, so unsettling from the outside, seemed to be reflected inside now. Every surface seemed to curve and stretch, like the house itself was smiling wider, anticipating something. Jack began to feel the pressure of unseen eyes watching him from the shadows. The longer he stayed, the more he felt the house itself was alive, almost aware of his presence, almost stalking him. The floors creaked as though someone or something was walking just behind him. But when he turned, there was nothing. Always nothing. He stopped in front of that one cracked mirror again, unable to resist the pull. This time, the reflection that stared back wasn't his at all. It was a distorted version of him, pale, gaunt, with eyes wide and lips stretched into an impossibly wide grin. The figure in the mirror moved on its own, raising a hand in a slow, deliberate wave. Jack stumbled back, his breath coming in shallow gasps. His reflection's grin grew wider until it seemed to split his face. Panicked now, Jack raced through the house, searching for the front door. But every time he thought he had found it, the house shifted again. The walls twisted, the hallways elongated. The windows, those grinning, watching windows, glowed faintly, mocking him. There was no escape. In his frantic search, Jack stumbled upon a hidden door, tucked away behind a bookshelf in the study. Desperate, he pulled it open and found a narrow staircase leading down into a basement. The air was cold and damp, and the smell of rot grew stronger as he descended. At the bottom of the stairs, Jack found something he wasn't prepared for. Rows of mirrors lining the walls of the basement. Each mirror reflected something different. Twisted, nightmarish versions of people he didn't know, their faces frozen in grotesque, grinning expressions. And then he saw it, the source of the whispers. At the center of the room, standing before the largest mirror, was a figure. It was impossibly tall, its limbs long and spindly, its face hidden beneath a veil of shadows. But Jack could see its mouth, a wide, gaping smile that stretched from ear to ear, too large for its face. The figure turned to face him, its grin widening even further, and Jack realized with horror that the whispers were coming from it. "We're all smiles here," the voice rasped. The mirrors around the room flickered, and in each one Jack saw himself, his own face, distorted, smiling that same horrible grin. He backed away, but the figure stepped closer, its presence suffocating. The last thing Jack saw before the darkness consumed him was his own reflection in the largest mirror, smiling back at him, trapped forever in the grinning house. Weeks passed before anyone mentioned Jack again. When his friends finally worked up the courage to return to the grinning house, they found the door wide open. Inside, everything was as it had been before. Dusty, decaying, with no sign of Jack. Except for one thing. The cracked mirror in the hallway. Now, instead of a single reflection, there were two. Both smiling. And the house's grin had never looked wider. I thought the cabin was beautiful when I first saw it. Warm lights glowing through frost-laced windows, fresh snow untouched except for my tracks. It felt like the kind of place meant for silence, for rest, for forgetting the world. The air was too still, but I told myself that was peace. Inside, the fire was already lit, though I don't remember striking a match. The door closed without a sound behind me. That's when I realized some places don't welcome visitors. They wait for them. They settle in quietly, waiting to see how long it takes before you understand you were always expected. Most people think Christmas Eve is magical. Soft snow, warm fires, family gathered close. I used to think that too, before last year, before the visitors. My name is Nathan Hale. I'm 34 years old, and I haven't slept very well since last Christmas Eve. Whenever anyone asks why, I tell them I have insomnia, or anxiety, or something equally mundane. The truth isn't something I should say out loud, not without sounding unhinged. But you asked for a story, and I'm tired of carrying this alone. It started on December 24th, during the worst blizzard our region had seen in decades. I'd rented a remote mountain cabin for the holidays, one of those rustic log places advertising tranquility, solitude, and an authentic old-world Christmas atmosphere. I thought a quiet holiday alone might help me reset, or maybe I was just hiding from the world after a brutal breakup. The cabin itself stood miles from the nearest town, no neighbors, no traffic, just a dark forest and endless hills of white snow. When I first arrived that morning, the snow was already knee-deep and falling in thick curtains. The wind howled, rattling the porch railings like someone kicking at the slats. I should have taken that as a sign. But I was stubborn. I always have been. I unloaded my bags, shoved wood into the old iron stove, and by afternoon the place was warm enough to remove my coat. I drank hot cider while watching the storm through the frosted windows. It felt almost peaceful. Then, sometime after sunset, the peace began to unravel. It started with the smell. At first, it was subtle, like wet fur and pine sap drifting in from the door. I figured it was a draft mixing with the scent of the Christmas tree I'd brought that morning. But the smell grew stronger, sour, tinged with something musky and animalistic. Then came the scratching. Barely audible at first, faint, rhythmic scrapes along the siding, moving from the door to the windows. I remember standing frozen by the fireplace, listening, waiting for it to repeat. It did. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Weirdest of all, though, the sound came from low to the ground, too low for a person. I considered the possibility of animals, maybe mice, but something about the pacing felt deliberate, almost investigatory, like whatever was out there was searching for an entry point. I told myself not to panic. The storm made everything sound stranger than it was. I checked the locks, tossed another log onto the fire, and tried to distract myself with an old novel I'd brought along. But the scratching kept returning, sometimes directly behind me on the opposite side of the wall, and each time it did, the fire seemed to dim a little, almost as if the flames recoiled. By 8 o'clock, I decided I needed to pour myself a stiff drink. It was only after I had the first glass of whiskey down that I gathered the nerve to open the front door. Just a crack, mind you, I'm not a complete idiot. The cold slapped my face instantly, and snow plowed in over my boots. I leaned out, a lantern in hand, expecting to see claw marks in the fresh snow. But there were none. Not a single track. The area around the porch was pristine, unbroken white, which meant the noises weren't coming from outside. They were coming from inside the walls. I slammed the door shut, bolted it, and backed away. The cabin creaked and groaned as the wind assaulted it, but the interior felt unnervingly still. The fire hissed, the wood crackling sharply, like it too was nervous. Then I heard footsteps above me, slow, dragging. The cabin had a small attic, accessible only by a pull-down ladder in the hallway. I hadn't stored anything up there. The listing had said the attic was empty except for some old insulation and a few boxes of abandoned decorations. Yet something heavy moved across the floorboards overhead. Thump. Drag. Thump. I grabbed the fireplace poker because it was the closest thing resembling a weapon and edged toward the hallway. Another thump, loud this time. Then a giggle. A child's giggle. My blood froze. I had no children. No one should have been within miles of that cabin. The laughter continued, soft, breathy, almost playful. Then the footsteps resumed, but now they approached the attic entrance directly above my head. Before I could decide whether to run or scream, the attic ladder unfolded on its own, slowly, one creaking segment at a time. Wood groaning, hinges screeching. I watched it descend, my breath shallow, poker raised uselessly. At last, the ladder touched the floor, and everything went silent. The space above was pitch black. The lantern by the door cast weak yellow light into the opening, but not enough to reveal anything beyond the first few rungs. Then something began to descend. Not quickly, not even cautiously. It came down step by step as though it wanted me to hear every tiny sound it made. A small hand, pale as wax, wrapped around the rung. Another followed. And then a face emerged from the void. A girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, wearing an old-fashioned winter dress trimmed with lace. Her long hair hung in damp strands, and her eyes were wide, blue, and glassy, like marbles pressed into dough. Her lips were almost purple. She smiled at me, revealing a mouth full of little yellow-white teeth. "Are you alone?" she asked. Her voice wasn't sweet like a child's. It was hollow, echoing slightly, as if spoken through a tunnel. I stepped back, raising the iron poker. She giggled again. "You don't have to be scared. I was alone too." "Stay where you are," I croaked, barely able to speak. The girl blinked slowly. Her skin shimmered faintly like frost catching the light. "It's Christmas Eve," she whispered. "We came to visit." "Who's we?" I asked uncertainly. She tilted her head and spoke eerily. "The others." I remember the exact moment I lost whatever composure I had left. It was when she lifted her hand and pointed at the window behind me. "They're here." I spun around and saw faces pressed to the glass. 4, 5, 6, maybe more. Small, pale faces with huge dark eyes staring in, smiling with those same too many teeth. I dropped the poker. The girl at the ladder giggled louder. "Don't worry, we like playing upstairs." She began climbing back up, vanishing into the darkness of the attic. When she reached the top, she looked down at me one last time. "Come find us," she whispered. Then the hatch slammed shut with tremendous force. I ran. Some people say adrenaline makes you brave. It doesn't. It makes you stupid. I barricaded myself in the bedroom with a chair under the knob and crawled under the blankets like a terrified child. Every part of me was shaking. My breath was embarrassingly loud. Even I wanted to tell myself to quiet down. Outside the bedroom door, the cabin creaked more than before. I heard rapid scurrying, like multiple small feet running across the floors and walls. Occasionally, a burst of giggles would echo through the hallway. Then the music started. It sounded like a warped version of a Christmas carol being played through an old phonograph. Notes slowed, dragged out, stretched unnaturally. The melody vaguely resembled Deck the Halls, but was wrong in almost every possible way, as if composed by someone who had only ever heard the song while submerged underwater. The singing that accompanied it was worse. High-pitched voices, childlike, many of them, all singing slightly out of tune. Fa la 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 la. The final note slid downward into something guttural, almost growling. I stuffed my fingers in my ears. It didn't help. The song felt like it wormed its way inside my skull. Each verse was louder, more distorted, more discordant than the last. I don't know how long the singing lasted. Time twisted strangely in that room. The storm outside raged, rattling the windows hard enough to shake my teeth. At some point, the music must have stopped. Then came the knocking. Not at the door, from under the bed. 3 slow taps, measured, almost polite. Tap, tap, tap. A child's voice whispered, "Can I come out?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. Small fingers slid around my ankle. I screamed and kicked, rolling off the bed and fumbling for the flashlight on the nightstand. I flicked it on and shone it beneath the bed frame. Nothing. Just undisturbed dust. But the fingers had definitely been there. My skin still tingled where they'd touched. I scrambled back to my feet, panting. The knocking resumed, now from the closet door instead. Tap, tap, tap. A different voice this time. Older, male, raspy. "Let us visit you." I pressed my back to the wall, flashlight trembling in my grip. The doorknob began to turn. I bolted for the window. It was old, but not bolted shut, and I threw it open, letting a blast of freezing air and snow hit me. I climbed onto the windowsill, intending to drop into the snowbanks below, but as I lifted my leg through the opening, I heard something behind me. The bedroom door latch was clicking open. Then a voice, many voices layered together, breathing my name. "Nathan." I jumped. The snow broke my fall, but I landed badly, pain shooting through my ankle. The wind roared around me. I forced myself to stand, limping, heart pounding. I didn't dare look back at the cabin. I half ran, half stumbled through the snow toward the line of trees. I knew the forest was dangerous in the storm. I knew that, but staying meant death, or maybe something worse. Behind me, I heard the cabin door creak open. Something stepped out onto the porch, but no footsteps followed. Only soft laughter drifted over the wind. I kept moving until the cabin was no longer visible whenever I glanced behind me, swallowed up by the swirling white. But I wasn't alone. Not for a second. The woods were a nightmare of bending pines and waist-high snow. My flashlight flickered weakly. The cold bit through my coat like knives. Every second, I expected those pale figures to emerge between the trunks, but instead, the forest gave me something new to fear. I noticed it when I stopped to catch my breath. The sound of tinkling bells. Faint, fragile, yet unmistakable. At first, I thought it was the wind catching icicles, but the bells formed a rhythm, a deliberate pattern, like someone shaking a set of tiny Christmas sleigh bells slowly, methodically. The melody drifted through the trees in gentle waves. Jingle, 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 jingle. It seemed to grow louder whenever I moved deeper into the woods. I tried calling out, "Hello? Anyone here?" The bells immediately stopped. Silence swallowed the forest. And then, jingle, 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 right behind me. I spun around, my flashlight shaking violently. The beam slashed across the trees, illuminating only snow and branches. No movement, no footprints except mine. But then I felt something warm brush against the back of my neck. I whirled around again. Nothing. The bells started up once more, this time circling me, faster, closer. The rhythm grew frantic, no longer melodic, but urgent. Jingle, 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 jingle. A whisper threaded through the sound. Find us. I stumbled backward, tripping over a fallen branch. I hit the ground hard, breath knocked from my chest. The bells rose to a fever pitch, and then everything went silent. The beam of my flashlight landed on something half buried in the snow, just a few feet ahead. A lantern, identical to the one the attic girl had carried. Its glass was cracked, the metal frame was rusted, and yet it glowed faintly, emitting a soft orange light. I crawled toward it despite every instinct screaming not to. The lantern's flame flickered as I neared, though there was no longer a breeze strong enough to disturb it. Attached to his handle was a small tag, a name handwritten in beautiful cursive. My own, Nathan Hale. My blood chilled deeper than the winter air. Behind me, soft footsteps pressed into the snow, many of them, surrounding me in a tightening circle. I grabbed the lantern and ran. By some miracle, I stumbled onto a narrow path cutting through the woods. The trees thinned out enough for me to see a dim light ahead, a cabin or shed of some sort. Desperate, I limped toward it. A wooden sign above the door read, "Caretaker's Outpost, established 1884. I pounded on the door. "Please, let me in, someone—" The door swung open before I finished. A man stood inside, elderly, weathered like sun-bleached leather. Thick beard, flannel coat, boots caked with snow. His eyes were startlingly blue and sharp as ice. "Get in," he said simply. I did. He shut the door quickly and slid a heavy steel bar across it. "Jesus," I gasped, collapsing onto a wooden bench. "There's something out there. Children, things, whatever they are, they're following me." "I know," the man replied. I stared at him. "You know?" He nodded slowly and sat in a carved rocking chair facing the door. "Been expecting you." That froze me. Expecting me? Why? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he gestured to the lantern I carried. "That ain't yours." "No," I admitted. "I just found it." "Then they've marked you," he drawled. I swallowed hard. "Who are they?" He leaned forward, elbows on knees. "You ever hear of the Yule children?" I shook my head. "They're older than Christmas," he said, his voice low. "Older than this forest. Used to be human, or so the stories say. Lost in a storm on Christmas Eve long, long ago. Never found their way home. Cold turned them into something else. Something hungry for warmth." I shivered. "They're ghosts?" "Not quite," he said slowly, as if unsure. "Ghosts leave the living alone if you leave 'em be. These ones," he shook his head, They want company. I whispered, They want me to come find them. Hey, that's how they lure folks. They play, they laugh, they sing. Once you join their games, you don't come back. Has this happened to other people? I asked incredulously. He sighed. I've buried more visitors than I care to count. The fire crackled behind him. Outside, the wind howled. I stared at the steel-barred door. So we just wait here until morning, I asked? His jaw tightened. Morning doesn't matter. What do you mean? They don't stop at sunrise, not anymore. My stomach dropped. Then what do we do now? He motioned toward the lantern. We break the mark. They can't take you unless it's intact. How? Before he could answer, something slammed into the cabin wall, hard enough to shake the shelves. The caretaker stood, cursing under his breath. They found us. The second impact struck the door like a battering ram. Then a child's voice crooned from outside. Let us in. More voices joined in unison. Let us in. Let us in. The caretaker grabbed a rifle from under his chair. They can't get through that metal bar, he said, though I heard uncertainty in his tone. But they'll keep trying. We need to hurry. He reached for the lantern, but the moment his fingers brushed it, the flame inside flared, burning bright blue. He recoiled. Damn! What does that mean? I whispered. They're close. Too close. The walls shook again, this time from multiple angles. The children outside giggled. And then something whispered directly into my ear. Nathan, open the door. I screamed and spun around. No one was behind me, but I wasn't imagining it. The caretaker looked at me with grim understanding. Once they learn your voice, they can speak through the cracks, he said. Don't listen, don't respond, and don't open that door no matter what they promise. My breath came ragged. How do we destroy the mark? He hesitated. You won't like it. I forced myself to meet his eyes. Tell me anyway. Well, you'll have to walk back to where you first heard the bells, he said. They only mark you once you accept the lantern. Return it there, extinguish the flame, and speak your true name aloud. My true name? I almost laughed. The idea seemed absurd, ritualistic nonsense. But the voices outside were still chanting my name, and something inside me knew he was telling the truth. But I can't go out there, I said. They'll follow me immediately. I'll distract them, he said simply. Before I could protest, he grabbed his rifle and threw open the back hatch of the cabin, a small door I hadn't noticed. Cold wind blasted in. You run, he ordered. Don't look back, don't stop, and don't answer him. Then he stepped outside and vanished into the storm. I was left alone. The children outside stopped laughing. Then they whispered in unison, He's leaving. I bolted. The forest swallowed me again. Branches whipped my face, snow stung my eyes. Every breath burned like fire. The lantern swung wildly in my hand, its flame flickering frantically inside the glass. Behind me, I heard the children pour into the woods. Dozens of tiny footsteps pattering across the snow, though I saw no shapes, no shadows, nothing but swirling white. Then came their voices. Faster, Nathan. Come play with us. We can see you. Their laughter echoed between the trees like a twisted carol. Jingle, jingle, jingle. The bells returned, louder this time, surrounding me. I was losing my sense of direction. Every tree looked the same. The storm erased my footprints instantly. I forced myself to keep moving, relying on memory, on instinct, to find the place where I'd first found the lantern. I stumbled multiple times, my injured ankle throbbing with each step. At one point, I fell face first into the snow, the lantern skidding out of my grasp. I lunged after it, fingers numb and trembling. The children's voices grew closer. "Don't run, Nathan. You'll fall again. We'll catch you." Their giggles became shrill, broken, animalistic. I lifted up the lantern. Its flame pulsed blue and white, reflecting off the snow like a beacon. Through the blur of snowflakes, I finally recognized the twisted pine tree where I'd first heard the bells. The ground around it was disturbed, as if many small feet had danced there. I staggered forward toward the spot. The wind screamed. My lungs felt like they were collapsing. The children's footsteps were right behind me now. "Return it," one hissed. "Give it back," another cooed. I dropped to my knees in the snow, placed the lantern at the base of the tree, and whispered, "My name is Nathan Hale." The flame surged. I repeated it louder. "My name is Nathan Hale." Behind me, the children shrieked, an inhuman wail that vibrated through the trees. I shouted it one last time, forcing the words through chattering, fear-stricken teeth. "My name is Nathan Hale." The lantern exploded. A shockwave of heat blasted outward, knocking me back. The world flashed white, and then everything went silent. When I woke, I was lying on my back, snow falling gently around me. The storm had stopped. A pale pink glow painted the sky. Christmas morning. My head throbbed. My limbs felt like lead, but I was alive. I sat up slowly, looking around. The forest was empty. No footprints other than my own, no bells, no laughter. No pale faces peering from the trees. The lantern was gone. No shards, no remnants, nothing. I wanted to believe it had all been a nightmare, but the bruise marks on my ankle where the fingers grabbed me said otherwise. I limped out of the woods, following the rising sun until I reached a plowed road. By afternoon, I'd hitched a ride back to town. The authorities found the cabin later that day. They did not find the caretaker. His outpost cabin was empty, dust-coated, abandoned for decades. They insisted I must have met a hiker, a squatter, a drifter. No one believed me. Not about the voices, the children, or the lantern with my name on it. I didn't push it. What would be the point? But I didn't leave empty-handed. When I returned to my car, something sat on the passenger seat. A small brass bell, old, rusted, engraved with the words, "We'll visit again." I kept the bell hidden in a drawer for months, convincing myself it meant nothing. But every time I touched it, it felt warm, impossibly warm. And as December began to approach again, the warmth grew. On December 22nd, the bell began to ring on its own, softly at first, then louder. On the night of December 23rd, I woke to giggling outside my apartment window, 6 stories up. Last night, December 24th, I heard footsteps in my hallway. Today is December 25th, Christmas Day. The bell rings constantly now, vibrating the entire drawer. I don't know how long I have before they come inside, before the attic girl returns, before the visitors ask me to play again. I'm writing this as quickly as I can, but my hands are shaking. I can hear the scratching at the door, low to the ground, rhythmic, deliberate. Scratch, scratch, scratch. They're whispering my name again. Nathan. They've found me. If anyone reads this, no, it's too late for warnings. They're already here. The doorknob is turning. The bell is ringing louder. The voices, oh God, they're inside. I never used to be afraid of cats. In fact, I thought I understood them. Those twitching tails, those slow blinks, the disdain that felt almost comforting. When you grow up alone long enough, strange habits fill the silence. Mine was feeding the feral cats behind the old boarding house. Their scraps were small, bones from chicken thighs, congealed leftovers, whatever I could scrounge from the kitchen without the landlady catching me. They trusted me in that cautious, wide-eyed way that cats do. All except one. The black one. He didn't come to the others' calls or join their little half-circle of waiting hunger. He watched from atop broken cinder blocks stacked by the fence, green eyes gleaming like stained glass. He never blinked, never moved. Not until the night everything changed. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Ezra. I am, well, was, a quiet man. A forgettable man, I suppose. I worked nights at a dusty little archive, scanning brittle documents from a time when people thought paper lasted forever. I liked the quiet. I liked the idea that nothing dead could reach out from its pages. Now I know better. The thing that came for me wasn't bound in parchment or buried in a ledger. It prowled on silent paws, and it had waited a long, long time. The first real sign that something was wrong happened in October, though I didn't understand its meaning until far later. The feral colony was noisy that night, yowling, hissing, scattering like leaves ripped by the wind. I had brought a plastic grocery bag full of cheap tuna and bread crusts, expecting the usual chaos of paws and tails. But when I stepped through the warped back door into the alley, a strange chill threaded through the humid southern air. All the cats had gathered on one side of the yard, pressed together like a terrified flock of birds. Their ears were flat. Their eyes, dozens of them, glinted at the same point atop the cinder block stack. The black one was perched there like a gargoyle carved from midnight. He was larger than I remembered, not fat, long. His silhouette stretched, tail swaying behind him like a thin rope, too deliberate to be casual. His fur was so black it seemed to absorb the sodium yellow alley light. And he was staring at me. For the first time, he blinked. Once, slow, intentional, acknowledging me. I felt that blink like a touch on my spine. "Hey," I whispered. "You hungry too?" The others didn't move. Their bodies were tight with dread. Even the mean old Tom with half an ear backed away from the cinder blocks. Then the black cat opened its mouth. The sound that came out wasn't a meow. It was a soft, wet clicking, like someone tapping bones together. I actually stepped back. He hopped down from the blocks with disturbing grace. Not cat-like, too smooth, too fluid, like a drop of dark ink that had learned how to shape itself. His paws were silent on the dirt, but the air shifted around him. He sat in front of me. Waited. I dropped the bag. The tuna cans rattled. The noise broke whatever trance I'd fallen into. I blinked hard, and when my vision steadied, the black cat was gone. Just gone. No running, no streak of movement, no shadow. As if he'd just stepped sideways out of existence. The other cats bolted in every direction. I was left alone in the alley with a bag of scattered tuna and a question I didn't want to ask myself. Why did it feel like something had just chosen me? The next day, odd things began happening. Small things at first, easy to dismiss. My shoelaces were tied together when I woke up. The lights flickered in long, rhythmic pulses instead of random bursts. I found muddy paw prints on the inside of my bedroom window pane. Not the outside. Inside. But what pushed it from weird into wrong was the archive. I was halfway through scanning a set of Japanese shipping documents from the late 1800s. Yellowed sheets that smelled faintly of mildew and iron, when a page stuck to the bottom of another. A thin scrap I hadn't noticed. Handwritten. Black ink, fluid brushstrokes. A short poem, or maybe a charm. I don't read Japanese, but I felt fear when I saw it. Each character felt like it had been written with a hand that trembled. Something about it drew my eyes, forced my breathing to slow in that trapped way a rabbit freezes under a hawk's shadow. And near the bottom was a hand-sketched outline. A cat. But not like any cat I'd ever seen. Its body was too long, its grin too wide, and its tail split at the end, two thin tendrils curling like fingers. My stomach tightened. I scanned it anyway. My job demanded thoroughness. And as the machine clicked and hummed, the air behind me grew cold. Not a draft. A presence. A weight. A breath. A voice whispered behind me, "Do you like it?" I jumped so violently that my chair skidded. But when I spun around, no one was there. The aisles between shelves were empty. The dim desk lamp cast its frail circle of light unchanged. The room was silent, but for my own heartbeat thudding against my ribs like it wanted out. I told myself I was just tired, sleep-deprived. Imagining things. But as I turned back, the scanner had stopped mid-process. The screen flashed. Jam detected. And there, on the glass bed of the scanner, was a perfect, wet paw print. At least 3 times the size that a cat should have. I tried to go to bed early that night. It didn't matter. Sleep refused to come. My overworked mind replayed every odd, twitching detail. The cats fleeing, the black one blinking at me, the paw print inside the window, the whisper in the archive. Sometime after midnight, exhaustion finally dragged me under. I awoke to a weight on my chest. Not the benign heaviness of sleep paralysis, not the vague half-awareness of a nightmare pressing down. This was physical, real, a pressure like 2 small paws resting carefully, deliberately. I opened my eyes. He was there, the black cat, sitting on my chest, but larger now. His front paws sank into my sternum with chilling solidity. His eyes gleamed brighter than the room should have allowed, reflecting no light source I owned. I tried to move. I couldn't. He tilted his head, studying me with unnerving intelligence. And then he parted his jaws and spoke. Not in English, not in a human voice, but something between a growl and a whisper slithered into my mind. Not through my ears, but directly behind my eyes. You fed the children, but you have never fed me. My heart slammed so hard I thought I'd pass out. The cat's mouth didn't move with the words. The sound was inside me, pulsing like a second heartbeat. I am older than this place. Older than your small bones. Older than your fragile breath. Almost older than the wind. Almost. His tail, no, tails, 2 of them now, then his whips curled behind him. And his teeth were too long. Too sharp. You called me with offerings you did not understand, he said. You gave tribute to my little shadows. They have accepted you, and so I have come to claim what is owed. I forced air into my lungs. What do you want? I asked, terrified. He blinked slowly. What all hungry gods want. And then the weight vanished. He was gone. I rolled off the bed, gasping, clutching my chest. The room was empty, silent, unchanged. But on my blankets were 3 wet paw prints. Large ones. Leading to the door. Fear does strange things to a man. It sharpens the senses. It erodes reason. It makes you believe in things you never would have dared consider before. I didn't go to work the next day. I pulled out my laptop and searched everything I could think of. Japanese folklore, cats with two tails, ancient spirits, yokai. Most sites were vague or contradictory, but certain details appeared again and again. The Bakeneko, a transformed cat, a cursed thing, a creature born from neglect or hatred or simply age. Some stories said they could grow monstrous with time. Some said they wore human faces or imitated voices. Some said they fed on breath. Some said they chose their humans. One line that I found hit me the hardest. A Bakeneko will fixate on a single person until the debt is paid, the hunger is met, or the spirit is banished. I didn't know how to banish anything, but I knew one thing. I couldn't stay in my room. I couldn't stay anywhere alone. Some houses rot, others remember. Larkswell Estate stood long after its owners had turned to dust, its windows dark, not from abandonment, but from restraint. The villagers said it listened, counting footsteps, weighing intentions, marking those who crossed its threshold with something patient. They said the fire never truly went out. On certain nights, when the fog sank low and the marsh grew silent, a pale light still burned in the east tower. Those who saw it spoke of a woman standing in the glass, her face calm, her eyes bright with something unfinished. The wise did not linger. The curious did not return. The ones who came seeking truth often forgot that truth, once invited inside, does not ask permission before it chooses to stay. For some doors are not meant to be opened, and some stories refuse to remain untold. The villagers of Harrowfen used to say the old Larkswell Estate was built on a fault in the world. Not a geological one, but a spiritual one. A thin place, a wound. They said the air within its halls was always colder than it should be, and that the candles there burned lower, as though afraid of what their light might reveal. By the time Elias Roxton arrived on a muddy October evening, the estate had been empty for 73 years. He stepped out of the coach, tugging his coat close against the wet metallic sting of the wind. The driver, an older man with a crooked back, refused to look at the house for more than a moment. "Sir," he muttered, voice clotted with unease, "it ain't safe after sundown. That place, things don't leave it the way they should." Elias smiled the polite, impatient smile of a man who had outgrown superstition. "I appreciate the concern, truly," he said, passing a few coins into the man's trembling hand. "But fear is often just history misunderstood." The driver only shuddered, cracked his reins, and lurched away down the lonely road,
eager to put as much distance as he could between himself and the estate. Elias stood alone. The Larkswell estate loomed against the bruised sky, tall and narrow as though stretched upward by something hungry. A barbed iron gate lay half open, as if the house had been caught in the act of inviting him in. Vines crawled up its stone walls like skeletal fingers. Its windows were dark, all but one. The uppermost window in the east tower glowed faintly, not with a lamp's yellow warmth, but a pale, almost lunar glow, cold and unnatural. Elias paused, a thrill, part fear, part fascination, shot through him. His late mentor, Professor Aldwin, had written extensively about the estate. A nexus of residual hauntings, he'd called it, possibly the strongest in the country. A perfect site for Elias's research. He took a deep breath, pushed the gate open, and stepped into the shadow of the house that was said to remember every sin committed inside it. As he approached the front door, the wind died. Absolutely. Completely. The silence felt deliberate. His fingers brushed the tarnished brass handle. It was warm. "Someone's been here recently," he murmured to himself, though he could not have said why he whispered it. He opened the door. The darkness inside took him with the slow intimacy of a closing hand. Elias lit a lantern and stepped into the entry hall. The floor was covered in dust, except for one thing, a clear path where footprints led away from the door. Human footprints. Fresh ones. They were small and delicate, like those of a woman. But what unsettled him most was not their presence. It was their direction. They led toward him, not away, as though someone had walked right up to the door and then vanished. Elias swallowed hard. His breath puffed in pale clouds, even inside the house. He moved deeper. Paintings lined the walls, portraits of the long-dead Larkswell family. Men and women with gaunt cheeks, black clothes, and eyes painted with unnatural precision, as if the artist had captured something that had been staring back at him. At the far end of the hall hung the largest portrait, a woman in a dark green dress, seated in a high-backed wooden chair. She was beautiful in the way ivy-covered ruins are beautiful, elegant, tragic, and undeniably haunted. Her nameplate read Lady Rhiannon Larkswell, 1841 to 1864. Only 23 at the time of her death. Elias knew the history. Everyone did. She had been accused of witchcraft after a series of misfortunes. The death of her husband, the collapse of the family fortune, and the disappearance of several townsfolk. Under pressure, the villagers had locked her inside the estate and set fire to it. But the fire had died inexplicably. No trace of Rhiannon was found. Her body, they said, never left the house. Some whispered she never let it. As Elias stared at the portrait, a soft sound brushed his right ear. Elias. His heart slammed against his ribs. The voice was female, barely a breath, soft as a sigh, but unmistakable. He spun, lantern raised. The hall was empty. only silence, and a faint smell of smoke. Old, cold smoke, like soot buried deep in stone. He steadied himself. Auditory hallucinations, he muttered. Ancient structures often create. The lantern flickered violently. For a split second, Elias had the unmistakable impression that one of the portraits had shifted, that an eye had turned toward him. He stumbled back, nearly dropping the lantern. When he blinked, the hallway was still again. The paintings stared ahead, frozen and proper, exactly as they should have been. He let out a shaky breath. Then he noticed Lady Rhiannon's portrait. Her painted eyes were no longer facing forward. They were fixed on him. And she was smiling. Elias hurried up the main staircase, half driven by fear, half by the lure of discovery. Every step groaned like a warning. Every shadow seemed to twitch at the edges of his vision. He navigated the twisting passages until he reached the base of the east tower. The door at the bottom was unlatched. The faint pale glow he'd seen earlier leaked through the cracks. He pushed the door open. A spiral staircase rose into the tower like the spine of some ancient creature. The glow pulsed faintly from above. "Rhiannon Larkswell," he whispered, "if you're here, I intend no harm. I only want to understand." A breath of cold air whispered down the stairs. "Do you?" The voice was behind him, close behind him. But when he spun, nothing was there. Lantern trembling in his grip, he climbed. At the top, he found a circular room. A vanity stood against the wall. Dust-covered bottles still arranged neatly upon it. A long rotted chaise. A cracked mirror. A wardrobe door half opened, revealing tatters of green silk. It was a woman's room. Rhiannon's room. The pale light came from the center of the floor. A sigil of some sort had been scorched into the wood. A twisted spiral pattern that pulsed faintly like the dying heartbeat of some dying thing. As Elias knelt to examine it, the mirror behind him cleared of its dust in a sweep, as though wiped by an invisible hand. He saw her in its reflection. Someone stood only a few feet behind him. Elias froze. He knew without turning who it was. Slowly he turned, but the presence was gone. The mirror cracked, a single line down the center, then another, and another, until the entire surface was webbed with fractures, as though something inside desperately wanted to break out. Elias backed toward the stairs, and the door slammed shut on its own. The temperature dropped so suddenly that Elias tasted metal when he breathed. The air did not move, it tightened. The lantern's flame leaned inward, shrinking as if the room were drawing breath around it. Her voice came then, not loud, not near, not far, present. "Do you know why they stopped listening?" Elias swallowed. His throat felt raw. The villagers thought. "They did not think," the voice corrected. "They decided." The word pressed against his ears. The floor creaked once behind him. He did not turn. They needed a shape for what frightened them. The vanity rattled softly. One bottle tipped and rolled, the glass whispering against wood. I learned very quickly that truth does not survive being useful. The sigil at Elias's feet warmed through the soles of his boots. He looked down and wished he hadn't. They said many things. A pause, not dramatic, measured. Most of them were close enough to hurt. The lantern flickered. Darkness crept along the walls, not rushing, not retreating, simply taking its time. Fire was not meant to punish me, the voice said. The flame guttered lower. It was meant to end the conversation. The lantern went out. Darkness settled, not empty, but occupied. Elias reached for matches. Something closed around his wrist. Cold, steady, not a grip, a claim. A whisper brushed the side of his face, so close he felt breath that did not warm him. You came here because you thought the story was finished. The darkness answered by showing him otherwise. The tower burning from below, smoke folding in on itself, fingers scraping wood until they bled, carving meaning into the floor because there was nowhere else for it to go. The sound of fire eating the stairs, the patience of it, the knowing. Not fear. Resolve. The vision released him without warning. Elias sagged against the vanity, his chest heaving. I didn't come to judge you, he said hoarsely. I didn't come to... No, the voice said, not angry, tired. You came because you listen when things linger. Frost traced the edges of the floorboards. The wardrobe door shifted once. Stopped. Stories like mine do not end. The pressure in the room increased, just enough to be noticeable. They move. Elias shook his head. I can write it. I can take it with me. You don't have to. You misunderstand, the voice said. Not loud, not sharp. Certain. You are already inside it. Elias reached for the staircase door, but it did not yield. Not because it was locked. Because it no longer recognized his leaving as an option. Elias did not remember starting to run. One moment he was in the room at the top of the tower, breath tearing at his lungs. The next, he was halfway down the stairs, hands scraping the wall to keep from falling. The darkness did not resist him. It accommodated. When he reached the bottom, the tower door gave way under his shoulder with a dry, splintering sound. The hallway beyond waited. It was longer than it should have been. Not distorted, not warped, adjusted. The floorboards extended into a stretch of dimness where the entry hall had once been. The ceiling rose just enough to make the space feel unfinished, as though the house had stopped correcting itself midway. Elias ran, his footsteps sounding wrong, too soft, too absorbed. The air pressed against his chest, dense enough to make breathing feel like effort. Doors lined the corridor. As he passed, some shuddered. From behind one came a low, indistinct murmur, many voices layered too closely together to separate. Another answered with nothing at all. The silence behind that door was so complete he staggered, dizziness blooming behind his eyes as if he had brushed against an absence with weight. He burst into the main hall. It took him a moment to understand what had changed. The portraits had not turned. They had always been facing him. He saw it now. Their eyes were wrong. Not tracking. Not watching. Remembering. Thin black lines sealed every painted mouth, drawn carefully, deliberately, as though someone had taken time to make sure they stayed stitched closed. All except for one. Lady Rhiannon Larkswell no longer sat in her chair. In the portrait she stood, not triumphant, but finished. The lines over her mouth were absent. A faint dark streak marked her chin, not fresh, not dry. Below the nameplate, new lettering had been pressed into the wood, deep enough to score it. He will carry it. Elias backed away, shaking his head. No, he said. The word felt small in the room. I can leave. I came here because I chose to. The front door stood open at the far end of the hall. Darkness pulled beyond it, thin and colorless. He ran. The handle burned with cold when he grabbed it. The door opened easily. Onto the tower room. The sigil pulsed, slow and even, like something resting. The room was empty. That was worse. Understanding hit him then, not all at once, but in pieces that refused to fit any other way. The house had not been showing him paths. It had been returning him to a point of reference. He stepped back, his heart hammering, and turned. The corridor behind him was different. Shorter. Closer. The doors along it no longer led anywhere else. Each one opened onto the same tower room. The same sigil carved into the floor. The same waiting. Elias moved faster, then slower, and then stopped altogether. Running changed nothing. Every turn corrected itself. He stood in the center of the hall, chest heaving, and felt the shift. Not in the walls, but in himself. A realization, quiet and irreversible. He understood then. He had not been chased. He had been kept in frame. The house settled around him, wood and stone easing into place as though satisfied. From somewhere deep within the structure, something moved. Not footsteps, not breath. Pressure. And in that pressure, an understanding formed. Wordless, undeniable. What entered this place did not leave unchanged. Some things left as fire, some as ash, some as stories that knew how to walk. Elias closed his eyes. When he opened them, the tower door stood directly in front of him, invitingly open. Time did not pass in any way Elias could measure. There were no cues left to mark it, no light, no rhythm, no sense of before or after. Only the slow settling awareness of his own exhaustion. Eventually, he found himself in the entry hall. He did not remember choosing it. His body simply stopped there, knees giving way, breath shallow and uneven. The house creaked around him, not loudly and not threateningly. The sound of old materials adjusting under a familiar weight, patient, observant, as if nothing were required of it anymore. "Why me?" Elias whispered, the question barely forming before it left him. The answer did not come as words, it came as presence. At the far end of the hall, something stood where the light thinned, not fully visible, not hidden, a shape that resolved itself only when he stopped trying to see it clearly. She looked as she had in the portrait, not burned or monstrous, not restored, simply intact. The way something looks when it has finished changing. She did not approach him. She did not need to. The distance between them felt irrelevant. "Because you noticed," the voice said. Not accusation or praise, simply statement. Elias swallowed. His mouth was dry. "I didn't come to take anything." "No," the voice replied. The word carried no heat. "You came because you thought there was something left to understand." The air pressed gently against his ears the way it had earlier, like a held breath. Images flickered at the edges of his thoughts, not visions or memories, impressions. A room that would not forget its last occupant, a name spoken too often, then never again. Fire meant to erase, instead leaving an outline. Elias's chest tightened. "If I write it," he said quietly, "does that end it?" She regarded him for a long moment, then the answer came, not as reassurance, not as refusal. "Stories like this do not end." The house shifted, just slightly, not in warning, but in agreement. "They simply change where they rest." Elias closed his eyes. Understanding arrived without relief. Not a command or a curse, but a correction. When he opened them again, the space at the far end of the hall was empty. No footsteps retreated, no door closed. The house simply felt finished with him. A sound echoed throughout the structure. Metal, old, the front door unlatching. Elias pushed himself to his feet, legs unsteady, and walked forward. Cold dawn light spilled across the threshold, pale and thin as if uncertain it belonged there. He stepped into it. The door did not slam behind him. It closed the way something closes when it no longer needs to be watched. Elias did not turn around. He already knew what he would feel if he did. Elias returned to the village without even noticing the road. The driver was there, as promised. He said nothing as Elias climbed into the coach. He did not ask what had been found. He did not look back toward the estate. Neither of them spoke. The village passed in fragments, stone, smoke, the sound of doors closing too early in the morning. Elias did not stop anywhere long enough for recognition to settle. When he reached his rented room, he sat at the desk. He did not unpack. He did not eat. He opened his notebook and began to write. Not quickly, not feverishly. Line after line, steady and careful, as though copying something already formed. His hand cramped, his eyes burned. He wrote through it. He did not write a confession. He did not write an accusation. He wrote the shape of what remained. When he finished, the room felt smaller. Not occupied, simply adjusted. The pages left his hand some time after. He did not remember the exact moment, only the absence afterward. That night, Elias lay on the narrow bed and stared at the ceiling until dawn. Sleep came briefly, without dreams, and left him feeling no more rested than before. In the morning, he stood by the window and watched the street below. Nothing happened. That, somehow, felt worse. Elias was awake when the knocking started. He had not slept deeply, only drifted, long enough for the sound to feel expected. The innkeeper stood in the doorway, pale and unsteady, holding the morning paper as though it weighed more than it should. "Mr. Roxton," he said, and stopped there. Elias took the paper. The headline filled the top half of the page. "Mysterious fire consumes Larkswell Estate." Beneath it, the photograph showed blackened stone and collapsed beams, smoke lifting in thin, uncertain strands. Nothing recognizable remained. Below that, a smaller article, the title carefully printed. Author found dead in his study, manuscript missing. Elias read it twice, then again. The name was not his. It was the man who had received the pages, his publisher. The publisher who had sent him to Harrowfen, the man who had read them. An eyewitness statement followed, boxed neatly at the bottom of the column. There was someone in the window when the fire started. The witness couldn't see her clearly, just the color of her dress. Elias folded the paper and set it down. The room felt unchanged. No cold breath, no pressure, no presence announcing itself. Only the ordinary weight of a cold, dark morning continuing as such mornings do, as though night had never truly lifted. That was when he understood. The house had not followed him. It hadn't needed to. What it kept was not walls or rooms or towers. It kept sequence. He sat at the desk and opened his notebook. The page was blank, but it did not stay that way. Outside, the street stirred. Footsteps passed. A door opened and closed. Somewhere, a breeze moved along the buildings. Not strong enough to be called wind, just enough to remind him that things, once set in motion, prefer not to stop. Elias wrote, not to finish anything, or to escape, only to keep the weight where it had settled. The house no longer needed him to stay. It needed him to continue.
I keep telling myself this story is about a glitch. That's the only way I can sit here with my laptop open at night, cursor blinking in a Discord server I've had muted for years, and not unplug my router and throw the whole machine out the window. A glitch implies accident, randomness, something that can be fixed if you find the right setting, clear the right cache, update the right driver. A glitch is the universe shrugging. But what happened doesn't feel like a shrug. It feels like a finger pressed lightly to the soft place behind my eyes. It feels like something patient, something that knows how people work, something that understands that we can endure almost anything as long as we're allowed to call it coincidence. The server is still there. It hasn't moved. It hasn't gone viral. It hasn't spilled into other apps or tried to do anything dramatic. It just waits, muted. And every night, long before my phone vibrates, my body starts preparing for the minute like it's a storm front rolling in. My mouth dries out. My hands itch. I check the clock without meaning to. 4:43. Then the world feels like it holds its breath. The server was called Dockside 09. An inside joke. A handful of us spent one reckless summer near Lake Erie after high school. Cheap beer, sunburns, sleeping on couches and floors, pretending adulthood could be postponed indefinitely. We were the kind of friends who swore we'd always stay close, the kind who made plans for the next summer before the current one was even over, the kind who took blurry photos at night and posted them with captions like forever and never changing. There were 8 of us, if you count the way we counted back then. It's strange how memory edits the roster, how it turns a messy group into a neat number. Like 8 is easier to carry than a list of names. Matt was loud and careless, always filming. Erin could talk her way out of anything, even when she was wrong. Connor was calm in the way that made him seem older than the rest of us. Jules was the quiet one until she wasn't, until she said something that made you stop and ask what the hell she meant. When fall came, we scattered the way people scatter when they finally accept that summer isn't a place you can live. College, work, marriage, kids. Some of us moved states. Some of us moved in circles and called it progress. Years later, long after the lake became a nostalgic backdrop we talked about at weddings, someone made a Discord server as a way to pretend we still spoke regularly. We didn't. It sat silent for months at a time, a digital attic filled with old memes and half-hearted birthday messages. Occasionally someone would drop a photo from back then and we'd all react with a few emojis, the way you react to a memory you don't want to touch too hard. The server became a place to perform friendship without actually doing the work of it. I muted it and mostly forgot it existed. Until last Tuesday morning when my phone buzzed on my nightstand at exactly 4:44 a.m. I remember checking the time because I was annoyed. I'm a light sleeper. Notifications at that hour usually mean something's wrong. Family emergency, work disaster. My heart was already racing before I even picked up the phone. The preview read, Dockside 09, new message. And then, where a name should have been, there was only the black circle Unicode symbol. Just a black dot. I assumed Discord hadn't loaded properly. Groggy, half awake, I tapped it and waited for the username to pop in like it was buffering. The server opened to a single message. It wasn't long, it wasn't dramatic. It just said, "Hey, remember that summer?" No username, no avatar, just a black dot circle beside the text like a hole punched out of the screen. I stared at it longer than I'd like to admit, waiting for something else to resolve. A profile, a bot tag, an edited marker, anything. Nothing changed. Then I noticed the timestamp. 4:44 a.m. Exactly. Not 4:43, not 4:45, not a few minutes ago. 4:44 a.m. exactly. I scrolled up. The last message before that was from Matt, 3 months old, some gif of a raccoon stealing a hot dog. Nothing else had changed. No join notification, no user added banner. Just that dot and that question sitting there like it belonged. I typed back because that's what you do when you want to force the world to behave normally. Who is this? No typing indicator appeared, no scene marker, no response. I told myself it was just a glitch, so I put my phone down and I tried to sleep. But I couldn't. My brain kept returning to the dot like a tongue returning to a sore tooth. I'd drift off for a minute, then jolt awake, certain I'd missed something. Certain the server had filled with messages while I blinked. At 7:30, my alarm went off. I checked again. No new messages. The dot was still there. Later that day, while eating lunch at my desk, I finally brought it up in the server. I tried to keep it casual. I asked if anyone had added a bot or invited someone overnight. The replies came fast, too fast for comfort. At first, it was confusion, then denial, then that sinking moment when everyone realizes they're describing the same thing from different angles. No one knew what I meant. No one had added anybody. Then someone, Connor, asked a question that hit like a hand on the back of my neck. "Wait, you all saw it too?" Screenshots followed, one after another. Same black dot, same message, same timestamp, 4:44 a.m., sharp as a knife edge. It wasn't just my phone. It wasn't my sleep fog. It wasn't a corrupted display on one device. Whatever it was consistent. We checked the server member list. 8 of us, same as always. And one extra entry at the bottom. No name, no status, just that black circle. Discord wouldn't let us click on it. Right-clicking did nothing. Hovering didn't bring up a profile. It didn't even show as offline. It wasn't away, it wasn't invisible, it wasn't do not disturb. It was just there. Matt tried to laugh it off. He said something about a ghost user, like that was a funny concept instead of an alarm bell. Erin posted a couple of question marks like she didn't want to be the first one to take it seriously. Jules wrote that Discord had been acting weird lately. I laughed along because that's what you do when something unsettles you but hasn't crossed the line into impossible yet. But while everyone joked, we all did the same thing. We kept refreshing the app like we could force the dot to become a normal name. We checked the audit logs. Nothing. No invites, no join history, no permissions changed. We checked our own accounts too, like the problem might be one of us. We compared the member list. We compared who had admin rights. We compared what roles existed. 8 names. 8. And then the dot sitting below them, like a footnote. Someone suggested it might be a deleted account that Discord couldn't render. Someone suggested it might be a display bug where a non-Latin character just wasn't loading. Someone even suggested it might be a bot that got removed but left a corrupted entry behind. Every explanation we offered was really the same explanation. This is normal. We just haven't found the normal reason yet. That night, I muted the server again out of habit. I told myself I didn't want my phone lighting up over some dumb Discord glitch. But that wasn't the real reason. The real reason was that muting it felt like putting a lid on something. Like if I didn't look, it couldn't look back. At 4:44 a.m., my phone buzzed. I didn't even pretend not to know what it was. The dot had posted again. This time, the message wasn't vague nostalgia. It asked, "You all remember the bonfire, right?" The bonfire was real. End of July. We dragged pallets down to the beach and nearly got fined by the cops. Erin burned her hand trying to throw in a half-melted lawn chair. Matt filmed it, laughing so hard his voice cracked. It was one of those memories everyone remembers slightly differently. The night you can retell 100 ways without ever mentioning the parts that ruin it. I answered because my hands were already shaking and silence felt like surrender. "Yeah, who is this?" No reply. Morning came and the server was suddenly alive in a way it hadn't been in years. No one was joking now. The energy had shifted from LOL Discord is weird to something tighter, uglier. People swore they haven't invited anyone. Someone demanded it stop. Someone else said it wasn't funny. Then Erin pointed out the thing that made my stomach hollow, that I'd already noticed but hadn't said. It only posts at 4:44. Exactly. We scrolled. Every message from the dot had that same timestamp, like it wasn't typing so much as arriving. That night, none of us muted the server. At 4:44 a.m., another message appeared. It asked if we remembered how quiet it got when the wind died. That one bothered me more than the others, because that wasn't a shared memory. That was mine. I remembered standing at the edge of the water, watching the flames flicker lower, hearing nothing but the lake lapping at the shore. I remembered noticing, very clearly, how the air suddenly went still, as if the world had paused. I remembered the way the fire sounded different without the wind feeding it. I remembered thinking irrationally that the lake was listening. I had never said that part out loud, never typed it anywhere. I didn't respond. The next morning, Jules messaged like she was trying not to hyperventilate through her fingers. She said it knew things, private things. Then she DM'd me separately. She asked if I'd ever told anyone about the pier, the night she went out there alone. I hadn't. None of us had. I sat at my desk staring at her messages and I realized something else. I had forgotten about the pier. Not completely, but enough that it wasn't part of the story I told when I remembered that summer. Jules said she'd walked out there because she couldn't sleep, that the boards had been damp, that the lake had been black, and that the wind had felt wrong. And as I read, my memory tried to offer me the comfortable version. We were kids, we were reckless, it was fun. But the dot kept speaking through the gaps like it had its own version of the story. A version that didn't let us edit. Connor tried to kick the account that afternoon. He screen shared so we could all see. He moved his cursor to the dot in the member list and right-clicked. To our surprise, an option appeared. Removed from server. For a second, I felt relief so sharp it almost hurt. If Discord could remove it, then it was a real account, a normal account, something with rules. Connor clicked, and the server refreshed. And for less than a heartbeat, every message in the chat, every old meme, every late-night confession, every casual complaint from years ago showed Connor as the sender. All of them.
My messages from years ago now said Connor. Aaron's birthday message to Jules now said Connor. Matt's raccoon gif now said Connor. It was like the server had been stamped, one heavy name pressed over everything. Like identity was just a label you could slide onto any history you wanted to rewrite. Then it snapped back. The dot was still there. Connor went very still. He asked if we'd seen it. We had. The worst part wasn't the glitchy swap. The worst part was how natural it looked for that split second. How easily the server accepted the wrong author. Connor logged off immediately. Then he stopped answering calls, stopped answering texts, like he'd stepped out of the world the way a cursor steps off a screen. At 4:44 a.m., the dot posted again. It said, Connor always leaves early. We didn't laugh. We tried reporting the account. Discord support replied with something automated and useless. They couldn't locate the reported user. Matt suggested deleting the server entirely. Erin hesitated. She said the words out loud this time, not as a joke. What if it follows us? We laughed, but it wasn't humor. It was a reflex, like whistling in the dark. We didn't delete it. And I hated myself a little for the relief that I felt when no one deleted it. Because some part of me wanted it to stay. Some part of me wanted an excuse to finally remember what we'd spent years avoiding. The messages changed after that. They stopped being nostalgic. They started being precise. At 4:44 a.m., the dot posted, Matt would forget his keys tomorrow. Matt scoffed. He said coincidence like it was a charm word. The next day, he locked himself out of his apartment and missed work waiting for a locksmith. He tried to joke about it in the server afterward, but the jokes landed wrong, like he was reading lines from a script he didn't believe. At 4:44 a.m. the following night, it posted that Erin wouldn't answer her phone when it rang. Erin didn't show up to work that day. Later, she wrote that she'd slept through her alarm, phone on silent, something she never did. We were scared now, properly scared. Because a ghost can be ignored, a glitch can be patched, but a thing that predicts you accurately feels like a hand closing around your future. Then came the message that didn't predict an accident. It predicted an absence. At 4:44 a.m. on Friday, the dot posted that Jules would almost say something important. Jules immediately flooded the chat with confusion. Not in neat lines, not in a clean message log, more like panic spilling over itself. What does that mean? Almost how? Almost what? What is it doing? She called me that night, her voice trembling. I keep feeling like I'm forgetting something, she said. Like there's a word on the tip of my tongue and it's making my teeth hurt. I listened to her breathe. I listened to her try to push the thought through. She started a sentence, stopped, started again, and each time it sounded like she hit something invisible. Like a wall inside her own head. It's like, she whispered, unable to finish. What? I said, but my voice came out too sharp. Silence. Not empty silence. Occupied silence. The kind where you can tell someone is trying to reach a memory and something is pulling their hand back. I don't know, she finally said, smaller. I almost had it. She never finished the thought.
The next morning, Jules posted in the server like everything was normal. When I asked her about the call, she didn't know what I was talking about. She didn't remember being afraid. At 4:44 a.m. Sunday, the dot posted again. It said I hadn't remembered yet. The message felt aimed. Not you all, not someone. Me. By then, Connor was gone. Jules was different in a way I couldn't name. Erin was jumpy, checking her phone every few minutes like she expected it to ring with bad news. Matt drank more than usual, the way he did back when he wanted to blur a night into something tolerable. We decided to try again. This time Erin would remove the account. We watched. She clicked remove. For a fraction of a second, the server refreshed, and every message showed Erin as the sender. Then Matt. Then Jules. Then, finally, after all the others, me. My name beside messages I didn't remember writing. Messages that weren't jokes or memes or casual updates. Messages about water. Messages about panic. Messages that made my throat tighten before my brain could translate them. Then it reverted. The dot remained. At 4:44 a.m., the message appeared. You were all there. That's when the memory came back. Not cleanly, not all at once. In pieces that didn't quite fit until they did. The bonfire hadn't ended quietly. There had been shouting. Someone had gone into the water. Someone hadn't come back out. I remembered standing shoulder to shoulder with my friends, staring at the dark surface of the lake and realizing something with sick clarity. We were making a decision without ever saying it. We would never talk about it, never report it, never remember it. Not because we were evil, because we were young, because we were scared. Because the moment you call for help is the moment you admit you're responsible for what happened. And somewhere in that silence, somewhere in the space where we refused to speak, the dot had been born. At 4:44 a.m., the next message appeared. It said simply, "It's time to remember me." The black circle changed. It showed a name. Not a username, a real one. One I hadn't thought about in years. One that should still be alive. My phone buzzed again. A DM. From the dot. From me. It said I was the last one to see them breathe. I haven't slept since. The server is still there, muted, waiting. And every night, at 4:44 a.m., I feel lake water closing over my ankles again. And I know that soon, one of us will finally type back the truth.
I didn't understand it at the time, but the house never hunted me. It waited. That's the mistake people make when they talk about places like that. They imagine something feral, something impatient, something that lunges. This wasn't like that. The house listened. It learned how long I stood in doorways, how often I hesitated before stepping forward, and how quickly hope returned after fear had done its work. It didn't feed on panic. Panic burns too fast. It fed on the moment right after, when you believe you might still leave. By the time I realized that, the house had already decided that I was staying. When I bought the house on Waker's Hill, I did it with the arrogance of a man who thinks the world has already shown him its worst. My father had died early. My mother disappeared into one of those sprawling desert cults, and I'd spent most of my adult life believing I had already crossed every threshold where terror might lurk. But I had crossed no thresholds. Not yet. Not the real ones. I found the house listed for shockingly cheap, sitting alone at the top of an overgrown hill like a blister on the land. The pictures were blurry, washed-out things, like the camera wanted nothing to do with the place. But I convinced myself that was just some real estate agent with a shaky hand. Cheap was cheap. I signed without even seeing it. That was how I ended up there on a stormy, collapsing afternoon in October, standing in front of a house that seemed to breathe. It wasn't a sound I heard at first. It was like a pressure in the air, the sense that the siding and beams pulsed slightly, drawn inward as if inhaling. The front steps sagged like a mouth that had forgotten how to close. Moss coated everything, and the windows were opaque with grime. None of that sent me back down the hill. It was only when I reached the door, an old swollen slab of wood that groaned like a dying thing, that I felt the thump. A pulse from inside, like something knocking once. Not greeting, announcing. I should have left. I know that now. Instead, I muttered something about old pipes and pushed the door open. That was when I felt the odor. Not smelled, but felt. Like a warm, rotten breath pressing against my face. And somewhere within the dark skeletal rooms beyond, something moved. I convinced myself that the shadows were playing tricks on me, that the yawning, crooked hallways were just unfamiliar. I even laughed when the light switch did nothing, as if that were the worst thing that could happen in a house like this. The electricity was out, the plumbing was questionable, and the roof leaked somewhere in the back. A rational person would have left and come back after a proper inspection. I stayed because I didn't want to admit that the place unnerved me. I stayed because I was stubborn. I stayed because, though I didn't realize it at the time, the spirit in the house wanted me to. I set up a cot in the living room, lit a lantern, and pretended to relax. The storm outside cracked against the walls like an angry sea. Rain hammered the roof. The lantern flame flickered in the drafts. Around midnight, I heard the footsteps, slow and wet and deliberate. They came from the hallway that led deeper into the house, the part I hadn't walked through yet, the part that seemed impossibly darker than the rest. Animal, I whispered to myself, house settling. The footsteps stopped directly outside the living room doorway. Then came the breathing, long and hungry, a wet inhale like something tasting the air. I reached for the lantern, but the moment my fingers brushed it, the flame went out. I sat in darkness thicker than anything I'd ever known. The breathing moved closer. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I couldn't even think. Something hovered inches from my face. I could feel the cold of it, and somehow the heat, too, as if its hunger radiated out through its nothingness. Then, with a sigh that froze my marrow, it whispered, "Not yet." The darkness lifted, just enough for the lantern to flicker back to life. The room was empty. But I couldn't shake the impression that the darkness hadn't left. It had only stepped aside. The next morning, the house didn't look like the same place. It looked older, hungrier. Where the wallpaper had simply peeled before, now it hung in thin strips, curling like tongues. The wood beneath seemed softer and darker, as if it had been soaked in shadow. Everywhere I looked, something felt wrong. Then I saw the scratches, long vertical gouges along the hallway wall. Some shallow, some carved deep enough to reveal splintered wood. They weren't the kind an animal made. These grooves were deliberate, repetitive, almost rhythmic. There were dozens, maybe hundreds, all at exactly the height of my chest. I stepped closer. The moment my fingers traced the nearest gouge, the house clicked. Not a physical sound, but a mental one, like a lock sliding into place. Behind me, the floorboards creaked. My heart stumbled and I spun around. Nothing. No one there. But the house was not empty. I could feel it, like pressure against my skin, like eyes everywhere at once. I walked slowly toward the living room to pack my things. When I reached the doorway, I found my cot was gone. Not moved, not tossed, simply gone, as if I had never brought it at all. The lantern remained, sitting in the exact center of the floor. Its flame was out, though I hadn't touched it. Beside it, carved into the wooden boards with the same deliberate strokes as the hallway scratches, were 2 words. Just hunger. The lettering shuddered faintly, like breath passing through it. I stepped back, then took another step. Behind me, the hallway darkened, as if something enormous had just stepped into it, blocking the light. I didn't look. If I looked, I would break. Instead, I said aloud, my voice shaking, "I'm leaving. I don't want anything from this place." The house answered. The walls groaned. The floorboards trembled. And from the deepest part of the structure came that same wet inhale. A breath taken in anticipation. I bolted. I didn't even grab anything. I didn't care if it rained or if I had to walk down the hill barefoot. I just wanted away. But when I reached the front door, it was gone. Not jammed or locked. Gone. The frame was still there, the hinges, but the door itself had become a solid wall. The wallpaper overlapped seamlessly where the door should have been. "No," I murmured. "No, no, no." A single knock sounded from behind the wall. One, slow and measured. A greeting. The spirit was patient. It was waiting. I stumbled back, panic clawing up my throat, and I fell onto the floor. My hand struck something sharp beneath me. A gap in the boards where one panel sat slightly raised. Frantic to distract myself from the growing realization that I was trapped, I pried the loose board up. Beneath it lay a small, rotting, leather-bound diary. The cover was soft, worn as cloth, and sticky with age. I opened it with trembling fingers. The first page read, "If you are reading this, it means the hunger has chosen you." My mouth went dry. I read on. I do not know its name. None of us ever learned it, but it lives between the walls, beneath the floors, behind the thresholds. It is old, older than the hill, older than the land, and it eats only one thing: fear touched by hope. The moment you believe you can escape, it feeds. Do not let it make you hope. Do not believe anything you see. It starves you of rest, of clarity, until your mind grows tender, and then it devours you. Not quickly, but over many nights. I leave this diary so that someone might understand before it is too late. It will toy with you. It will speak to you. It will learn you. If you are lucky, you will die before it finishes. The entry ended abruptly. Underneath, a smaller scrawl. When it says not yet, run. You still have time. My blood turned to ice. It had said those words. I flipped the page. Blank. Another. Blank. The entire rest of the journal was empty except for the last page. On it, as though freshly carved with a blade, "I am still hungry." My breath caught. Those weren't the words of whoever wrote the journal. They were for me. I don't remember dropping the diary, but suddenly it was across the room and I was somewhere else, pressed against a corner, hugging my knees and trembling. I became aware of the sound first. A dragging, flesh over stone, wet, labored, and patient. It came from beneath the house, moving through the foundation, following me. I scrambled to my feet, dizzy with terror, and back down the hallway, even though every instinct screamed not to go deeper. But the dragging followed, echoing up through the floorboards. The ceiling lights, though dead, flickered anyway, buzzing like insects trapped in glass. And then the wall beside me bulged outward, just slightly, but enough to suggest a shape, a face pressing from the other side. But there were no features, just the hint of sockets, the impression of a mouth. The surface of the wallpaper stretched over it like skin over a skull. It opened that implied mouth, and the house exhaled hot, rancid breath. I screamed and ran. Every direction brought me deeper into a maze the house had not possessed before. Doorways led to hallways that led to rooms that twisted back into themselves. The architecture sagged and pulsed as if the house were becoming the spirit rather than merely containing it. At some point, I found myself in the bedroom at the end of the hall. I realized then that the door had closed behind me and locked. I hadn't touched it. The room felt smaller every second. In the corner sat an old wardrobe, its doors cracked open as ribs pried apart. Something moved inside it. A hand. Or what used to be a hand. The fingers were too long, jointed too many times, bending forward and backward. They scraped along the inner surface of the wardrobe door as the spirit, its body unseen, pulled itself forward. Every instinct in me froze. Every bone screamed at me to be still. The fingers stopped moving. Then they curled, beckoning. The wardrobe door swung wider, though the thing inside did not touch it. And deep within that impossible darkness, two pale shapes glimmered. Eyes. Empty, colorless, and starving. The hungry spirit spoke without sound, the voice a sensation crawling beneath my skin. I can taste your hope. The wardrobe surged forward, stretching impossibly, as the room itself folded toward me. I hurled myself out the window. The glass should have shattered, but it didn't. Instead, it bent like flexible plastic, warping beneath my weight and throwing me back. The wardrobe shuddered open like a yawning mouth, and then the house went silent, which was somehow worse, because silence meant the spirit was choosing how it wanted to devour me. I don't know how long I lay on the floor, half-conscious. Time in that house didn't function the way it should. Every second stretched thin, every breath felt stolen. When I finally dragged myself upright, the room had changed. The wardrobe was gone. In its place was a doorway, one I knew had never been part of the layout. A narrow frame of splintered wood stood crookedly, leading into total darkness. But I heard something from within. A voice, a man's voice, whispering urgently. "Don't look. Don't speak. Come quickly." It sounded human. For a moment, God forgive me, I felt hope. The spirit could mimic voices, I knew that, but this one sounded different, less hungry, more desperate. "Please," the voice whispered, "it will hear us." Against every rational instinct, I moved toward the doorway, because I needed to believe someone else was trapped here with me. I stepped into the dark. The air changed immediately, becoming cold and thick, almost gelatinous. I reached out and felt walls on either side, narrow and suffocating, like I was walking into the house's throat. The voice whispered again, closer, "Here." A dim glow appeared, revealing a cramped crawl-space room. In the corner crouched a man in tattered clothes, his face gaunt, eyes sunk into purple hollows. He looked like he hadn't seen sunlight in years. "You're real," I breathed. He shook his head. "No one who comes here stays real for long." His hands trembled as he beckoned me closer. "It feeds," he whispered, glancing around. "But it cannot eat what hides. It hates the hidden places. That's why I've lived." "How long?" I asked. "A season," he muttered. "Or maybe a century. Time doesn't behave here." He gestured for me to sit. I hesitated. He noticed and smiled weakly. "You think I'm a part of it? No. I've tricked it. Kept myself beneath its notice. You can too. Just don't hope. Don't run. Don't think about leaving. Hunger smells thoughts." My blood ran cold. He leaned closer. "It listens." My skin prickled, but then I saw it. Behind him. In the wall, a shape. A face. Not his. Its. The man must have seen my expression change. His smile faltered. "You see it, don't you?" he whispered. I nodded. "It found you quicker than me," he said quietly. "It likes you." He closed his eyes. "Run." The wall behind him split open like rotting skin, and a mass of limbs, too many, bending wrong, jointed like broken branches, exploded forward and wrapped around him. His scream was brief. The spirit dragged him into the walls with sickening speed, the sound of cracking bone echoing like wet branches snapping. I ran. The crawl space shrank around me, breathing, throbbing, and squeezing me forward like a swallowed meal. My only thought was to move. But behind me, in a voice that was not the man's, "Not yet." I don't remember escaping the crawl space. I only remember collapsing in the kitchen, the floorboards swollen with moisture and old stains. The house felt giddy. It thrummed faintly like a throat purring after a meal. I crawled to the sink, desperate for water. The faucet coughed out something brown and viscous. The smell alone made me retch. My body ached with exhaustion. My mind cracked at the edges. Sleep tugged at me like a hook beneath my ribs. But I remembered the diary's warning. Rest is how it softens you. I slapped myself hard to stay awake. And that was when the spirit spoke again. This time in a dozen overlapping voices, male and female, young and old. "Sleep and be tender." The kitchen lights flared violently and then burst, raining glass down on me. When I opened my eyes again, I was on the floor. Had I slept? Seconds? Hours? I didn't know. But I knew one thing. The hunger had grown stronger, and so had its interest in me. At some point, don't ask me how long, I dragged myself back toward the front of the house, toward the place where the exit had once been, and to my shock, the door was there again, standing open, welcoming. The wind outside rolled in, cold and sharp and real. I began to weep. Freedom, escape, life. I could run, and I could live. I could leave. Every step toward the door felt like shedding chains. The sunlight grew brighter, the outside air cooler. The smell of wet leaves filled my nose. I could taste freedom like water on my tongue. One more step, just one more. I lifted my foot and stepped through the threshold. And the world vanished. I didn't fall. The door simply opened onto nothingness. A void of biting cold. A mouth. And it closed around me. Darkness swallowed me whole. And the spirit whispered, "Hope tastes best." The house reassembled itself around me. The door was gone. The hallway reformed. My body lay on the floor. I had never left. I had only fed it. After that, the house no longer bothered pretending. The rooms melted into each other, bending and reforming like flesh knitting over bone. Doors appeared and disappeared. Windows opened onto screaming faces or forests of black teeth. It stalked me openly. I could hear it giggling sometimes, a wet, choking sound. The walls quivered when I touched them. The floor swelled beneath my weight. And the spirit, it watched. Sometimes from the ceiling, its long arm dangling like a spider's leg. Sometimes from the floor, its fingers poking through cracks. Sometimes directly behind me, close enough for me to feel the cold drip of its breath down my neck. "You are right," it murmured more than once. I did not know how much longer I could last. My mind frayed, my body trembled, and still the spirit waited, because it wanted me afraid, but still clinging to hope. That made the fear sweeter. At some point, I don't remember when, I found the diary again, but it wasn't where I'd left it. It was in my hand, open to a page that had not existed before. On it, in handwriting that looked eerily like mine, were the words, "To survive, give it to someone else." My blood froze. A sacrifice? A replacement? If I lured someone else here, the spirit would take them instead. I dropped the diary as if it were fire. "No," I breathed. "I won't do that. I won't." The house shuddered violently. The walls bulged. The floor cracked. Plaster rained down like dandruff from a giant corpse. The spirit did not like my answer. It appeared fully before me. I cannot describe it. Not truly. It was not a shape so much as an absence wearing the idea of limbs. Its face was a smear of hunger, empty sockets and an ever-widening mouth filled with teeth folding over each other like pale knives. Its voice was the sound of a grave settling. Not yet. It touched my face, and I screamed as memories, my memories, tore free of me like meat peeled from bone. The spirit fed on them, not devouring, sampling, tasting. One more night, it set into my skull. Then you are ready. I do not remember most of that final night. Only flashes, darkness, crawling, screaming that might have been mine. The spirit above me whispering. The house shaking, laughing, drinking in my terror. Until suddenly, silence. Something changed. The house paused, and I realized the spirit was no longer watching me. It was waiting. But for what? I looked down. The diary lay open beside me. The final page was blank. Then words bled across it, letter by letter, as if carved from the other side. The threshold opens, and the front door, the real front door, exploded open. Sunlight poured in, fresh air, freedom, hope. The spirit loomed behind me, coiling like a shadow, ready to pounce. It whispered, trembling with anticipation. Run. Because it wanted me to. Because the moment I believed I could escape, the moment hope bloomed bright and desperate, my fear would become exquisite. I staggered toward the exit, my tears blinding me. Sunlight warmed my face. I could hear birds, wind, life. I could make it. I could. I stopped. Because I saw something. My reflection in the open doorway. Not the world outside. Only me, standing in a door-shaped mirror. The spirit's voice slid into my ear. Step through. Feed me. My hope snapped, and with it, the illusion. The doorway collapsed inward like rotten fruit, revealing nothing. No world, no escape, only teeth, rows upon rows of teeth. And then the spirit lunged. I don't remember dying, because I didn't. Not fully. Not the way we think about death. I woke in darkness, cramped, pressed between walls that throbbed like veins around me. I cannot move. I do not breathe. I see through the house. I watch the doors. I listen for footsteps outside. I feel the hunger inside me, stretching, sharpening. I understand now. The spirit was never one thing. There were many. It was every soul that had ever fed it. And now, I am one of them. Someone stands at the foot of Waker's Hill. A new stranger, a hopeful fool. They take their first step toward the house, and somewhere deep inside these walls, in whatever remains of my mind, something ancient rises like a tide. I feel my fingers reach out through the plaster, carving new messages, new warnings, new lies, scratches, dozens of them, all at chest height, all deliberate, all saying the same thing, just hunger. And as the stranger reaches the door, I whisper from every dark place at once, "Not yet." I always believed that I was a rational man. A man of science, logic, and reason. But what I experienced in Harlow's Glen changed all of that. Now I can only hope to get the story down before she comes for me. It began, as these things often do, with a death. Old man Harper had lived at the edge of town for as long as I could remember. Some said he was over 90, though no one seemed to know for sure. I never knew the man well, only enough to wave hello if I passed him on one of my afternoon walks. He was the type of person you'd hear whispers about. Odd, but harmless. Then, one brisk autumn morning, I read in the local paper that Harper had died. There was something about it that felt wrong. The obituary described his death as unexpected, but at his age, could anything be unexpected? Yet it wasn't the death itself that disturbed me. It was the place where they found him. Harper had been discovered deep in Harlow's Glen, a dense forest on the outskirts of town. I'd grown up hearing stories about the place, how it was haunted or cursed or whatever. How no one who went too far into its depths came back quite the same. But of course, these were just stories told to frighten children. Still, Harper's body had been found in a particularly remote part of the glen, a place no sane person would willingly go. Curiosity gnawed at me. The day of Harper's funeral was cold and gray. Fitting, I thought. The old church where the service was held was almost empty, save for a handful of town elders, a few curious onlookers, and, oddly, no family. Harper had been a recluse, and no one could remember if he had any relatives. His absence of kin only deepened the mystery. After the service, I struck up a conversation with Father Collins, the priest who had presided over the ceremony. He was an older man, his face lined with years of service to the community. "Did you know him well?" I asked. "As well as anyone, I suppose," Father Collins said, his eyes distant. He came to church every Sunday, but always sat in the back, quiet as a ghost. Never spoke unless spoken to, and even then his words were sparse. I asked, "Do you know what he was doing in Harlow's Glen?" The priest's face tightened, his lips pressed into a thin line. That place, no one in their right mind goes there. It's cursed, always has been. I raised an eyebrow. Cursed? How so? Collins hesitated, then sighed. There's an old legend, ancient really. They say a witch lived in those woods long ago, before this town was even founded. She was hanged by the settlers, accused of practicing dark magic, of summoning evil things. But before she died, she cursed the land, said anyone who entered her domain would be marked. Marked? I echoed, feeling a chill despite myself. The priest nodded gravely. Harper went into those woods, didn't he? Found dead there. I'd say that's mark enough. Over the next few days, I couldn't shake the feeling that something about Harper's death needed investigating. Rational or not, I was drawn to Harlow's Glen like a moth to a flame. So one foggy morning, I packed a small bag, just a flashlight, a notebook, and a flask of water, and headed toward the glen. The closer I got, the more oppressive the air became. The trees here were twisted, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal hands. The fog thickened as I ventured deeper, swallowing up the sunlight until the world around me was cast in an eerie twilight. I told myself it was just the atmosphere playing tricks on my mind, but as I walked further into the forest, something felt off. Stillness was unnatural. No birds chirped, no wind stirred the leaves. It was as though the glen itself was holding its breath. Then I heard it. A whisper. Faint, barely discernible, but unmistakable. My heart raced as I scanned the surrounding trees, but there was no one there I could see. Just the forest, silent and waiting. "Who's there?" I called out, trying to sound braver than I felt. No answer, just more whispering, though now I could actually make out a few words. "Go away." I shook my head, convinced it was just my imagination, or maybe the wind was playing tricks on me. But as I pressed forward, the whispers grew louder. And then as suddenly as they'd started, they stopped. I was standing in a small clearing, a dead space where the trees thinned, and in the center stood a stone well, ancient and crumbling, overgrown with moss. There was something deeply wrong about it, a presence that seemed to emanate from the stones themselves. As I approached, I noticed symbols carved into the sides, symbols that made my skin crawl. I knelt to get a better look when I noticed something else, the faint smell of decay. Harper's death flashed in my mind, and I recoiled instinctively. But then I saw it, something glinting at the bottom of the well, too far down to make out clearly. A ring, a bucket, a piece of jewelry. I fished a rope from my pack, lowered it into the well, and began to climb down. It was colder inside the well, unnaturally so. The air smelled of earth and rot, and as I descended deeper, the sense of being watched grew unbearable. When my feet touched the damp ground at the bottom, I pulled out my flashlight and scanned the small chamber. There, half buried in the mud, was what I had seen from above. A ring, tarnished but unmistakably valuable. I reached down to pick it up, but before I could touch it, I heard a voice. "Leave it." The voice was right next to my ear, raspy and cold. I froze, every hair on my body standing on end. You should not be here. I turned to look, but there was no one there. My flashlight flickered, and for a split second I thought I saw her. A woman draped in shadows, her eyes hollow and her mouth twisted into a grotesque smile. And then just as quickly as she appeared, she was gone. My heart pounding, I grabbed the ring and scrambled back up the rope. I didn't stop running until I was out of the glen, the cursed woods far behind me. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the ring in front of me. I couldn't stop staring at it. It was an old gold band, the kind you'd see in museums, with strange symbols etched into the metal. I had no idea what they meant, but I was determined to find out. The next day, I visited the town's library, hoping to dig up more about Harlow's Glen and the legends surrounding it. The librarian, Mrs. Holloway, was a stern woman in her 60s with a keen eye for detail. When I asked her about the history of the Glen, her face darkened. "You're not thinking of going there, are you?" she asked, her voice low. "I already have," I admitted. "I found this." I showed her the ring. Her eyes widened in horror. "You need to get rid of that," she whispered, almost frantic. "That belonged to her." "Who?" I asked. "The witch," Mrs. Holloway said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Eliza Dane." I had never heard the name before, but as soon as she said it, a wave of cold swept over me. She went on to explain that Eliza Dane was the woman accused of witchcraft centuries ago, back when the town was just a small colonial settlement. She had been blamed for a series of mysterious deaths, children vanishing in the night, crops withering, livestock found mutilated in the fields. The settlers, desperate and terrified, had turned to superstition, and Eliza, with her strange practices and knowledge of herbs, became their scapegoat. "She was hanged in Harlow's Glen," Mrs. Holloway continued. "But before she died, she swore vengeance. She said that anyone who wronged her, anyone who entered her land, would be cursed. That's why no one goes there anymore, and why you should never have taken that ring." "But it's just a ring," I said, though I didn't quite believe it myself. "It's more than that," she insisted. "It's a link to her. She's marked you now." From that night on, my life became a waking nightmare. At first, it was subtle. The lights in my house would flicker. Cold spots appeared in rooms that had never been drafty before. And then I started hearing whispers. Faint, barely audible, but unmistakable. It was the same voice I had heard in the glen, down in the well. The voice of the witch. And then things escalated. I would wake in the middle of the night to find the room ice cold, my breath visible in the dark. Shadows shifted in the corners, forming shapes that seemed almost human, but not quite. Once I woke to find a figure standing at the foot of my bed. A woman, her skin pale as moonlight, her eyes black as voids. She smiled at me, and when I blinked, she was gone. Sleep became impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt her presence. Eliza Dane, the witch, haunting my every moment. Desperation drove me back to the glen. I thought if I returned to the ring, maybe, just maybe, I could break this curse. It was a foolish hope, but I had nothing else. The fog was thicker this time, the air colder. The well seemed even darker, more menacing, as if it had been waiting for me. I stood at the edge, the ring clutched tightly in my hand. "I'm sorry," I whispered, hoping she could hear me. "I shouldn't have taken it." The wind howled in response, and then from the depths of the well her voice echoed up to me. "It's too late." A shadow rose from the well, darker than night, swirling and coalescing into the form of a woman. Eliza Dane, the witch of Harlow's Glen, her eyes burning with hatred and sorrow. "You will never be free," she whispered, her voice cold and final. "Not until you pay the price." And then she was upon me. I don't know how much time has passed since that night. Days, weeks. Time feels strange now, slipping through my fingers like water. I write this from a small room, the walls bare, the windows sealed shut. I don't leave anymore. I can't. She's always watching, always waiting. I hear her whispers constantly now, even in my dreams. Sometimes I see her in the mirror, standing behind me, her cold breath on my neck. I know she's coming for me, and when she does, I'll be ready. I have no choice. Because the witch of Harlow's Glen never forgets, and she never, ever forgives.